All right, guys, we're live. So we'll wait for some of the folks to join us here, and then we'll get going here. Welcome back, everybody. Another session of Renew Your Finance. And we're gonna get going here. We're gonna have a great topic. We're gonna do a quick recap, and thanks for everybody that's joining us tonight. We also want to thank everybody that's joining us via YouTube when we post the replay of this. Once again, we'll go ahead and get started. While we're waiting on everybody to come in, we'll do a quick recap, and then we'll jump right into tonight's topic. This whole thing with inflation and how it's affecting our budget. So we'll let Rondell kick us off with our recap, and we'll go right into our topic for tonight.
So good evening, everybody. So if you remember, during our last session, we explored the last 3 baby steps. So we actually looked at baby step 5, where we talked about those things that are near dear to our heart, and that's our children, and that's being able to set our children up for college. So during that particular session, Adrian went through a number of vehicles that you can utilize in order to properly set your kids up for college. Because what we don't want to do is have our children go to a 4-year institution and then take out so many student loans that they find themselves in debt before they even graduate from college. And if we're able to do this right by using one of those 529 plans, then your child will have that ability to step out on the right foot when they leave that institution. And that was step 5. So then we rolled into step 6, and step 6 is a major step, because we strictly was talking about paying off your home. That's the home that you currently reside in, that you know that you're not going to be living anywhere else, because that is the house that you and your spouse, or if you're single, you yourself decided, like, this is it. So step 6, if you have completed all the previous steps as you should have up to this point, you should be hitting that gazelle intensity and ready to knock out that last bit of debt, which is your home. Because the beauty of knocking out that last bit of debt is going to step 7. And that's where you're able to live like no other and being able to give like no other, because we truly believe that that's what God wants us to do, to be able to be the hands and feet and to do his work within this earth, and being to be freed up from all those things and getting your affairs in order, where you have your emergency fund, you got your finances, your retirement fund going properly. Then you also setting your children up for success with the educational vehicles that you put into place, and now you paid off your house. What beauty would that be to free yourself up to be God's blessing to others within this earth? So those are the things that we went through in the last session. But over the last week or so, Adrian and I have been having some discussions, because we understand that we're still on this journey. And in today's environment, you if you haven't noticed, you haven't been living on this planet, to be truthfully honest with you. But you should have noticed in the last couple of months that the price of goods has gone up tremendously. And what we mean by that is that you no longer are going to the grocery store and getting that loaf of bread that probably normally cost you 92 cents, but depending on the brand that you've gotten. And now you went in there and it's $1.86, and you wonder how the price doubled in such a short amount of time. At least I did, especially when it came down to black pepper. How can a small can of great value black pepper that I normally, get from Walmart, that was normally like $2 for one of the large cans, because we kind of use black pepper around here quite often as a seasoning, went to $4. It had doubled in price. So what is truly going on that's making prices go up so dramatically in the last couple of months, or maybe in the last 6 to 8 months? Well, it's called inflation. And inflation has been hitting us in the pocketbooks for some time now. And it may be rocking your budgets, and you're probably saying, there's no way that we can stay on this path with the way inflation is going out of control. And the federal chairman, he's going to continue to raise rates, because he's actually trying to control that inflation. And that's one way to raise rates. But to get you more of what inflation is, we have a quick video for everyone to view, so that way they can understand exactly what inflation is, and then we can discuss it. And then we can discuss some tips that Adrian and I utilizes on a daily basis, even before we got to this point. But nonetheless, it could be applied to this environment that we're currently in. So, sit back, enjoy the short video, and learn what inflation is and how we play a factor in inflation.
Prices keep rising in America, and policymakers are asking how the central bank could let this happen.
Forward guidance, I think, overall slowed the response of the Fed to the inflation problem last year.
Investors think more price increases are coming. By the Fed's count of inflation expectations, prices will have risen an additional 6.8% by the summer of 2023. It turns out that the Federal Reserve might hold some of the blame.
It is going to be very challenging. It has been made significantly more challenging by the events of the last few months.
We need to make sure that the central bank is on the side of everybody in the country.
The big concern is that not only will we have these big increases in inflation this year, but that will lead people to expect higher increases in the future. Because if that's the case, it sort of compounds upon itself.
We could be headed to stagflation. It might get better, but it might get a whole lot worse. And if it gets a whole lot worse, brace yourself for uncertainty.
How did the US government misread inflation? And what does this mean for people in the United States? The Federal Reserve is America's central bank.
The job of the Federal Reserve is to safeguard the buying power of the dollar and to make interest rate policy in the public interest. They're supposed to minimize inflation, maximize employment.
It does this by working with retail banks that Americans use. Think Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, etc.
Banks have an account at the Fed the way you have an account at a bank, and the Fed takes that money and invests it in treasury bills, mortgage-backed securities, and pays the bank a little bit of interest.
The Fed manages the US money supply. Their decisions can have a large economic impact, but some believe that Congress's actions within the economy are much more important.
The Federal Reserve needs to be reformed. The Federal Reserve needs individuals who are on the receiving end of monetary policy, not individuals who are only PhDs in economics who've never held a job in the real world and have a pension for life and are not affected by zero interest rate policy making life more difficult for savers who don't have a public pension for life.
The Fed's job is complicated. It involves making predictions about the future. Things like, how much will inflation be a year from today? And if it's up, what should we do about that? Experts believe the US central bank has made important decisions that drove better outcomes throughout history. Supporters point to the Fed's strong provisions of credit during the 2020 recession. This cash ultimately kept millions of people afloat as the world locked down. Also, the bank achieved a balance of low inflation, cheap lending rates, and low unemployment for the better part of 3 decades. This stability minimized price increases while supporting the creation of many jobs. But occasionally, mistakes are made.
The forward guidance, I think, overall, on the margin, slowed the response of the Fed to the inflation problem last year, to some extent.
So does that mean it was a mistake?
I think, in retrospect, yes, it was a mistake, and I think they agree it was a mistake.
So here are the 3 big mistakes. The first was a sharp increase in the money supply. In recent years, the overall pot of cash in the Fed's control has grown sharply. Changes in the money supply can take months or even years to materialize within the economy.
If the same amount of goods existed in the economy, but there was twice as much money, then we would think that the price of everything would double.
This sharp increase initially showed up in the savings accounts of regular Americans, before they quickly vanished.
Well, from everything that we've seen, that money is concentrated in the hands of the oldest and the wealthiest Americans.
What has stuck around is a fierce upward spiral in prices for goods. As this dynamic took hold, the Fed kept adding dollars to the money supply, primarily by printing and issuing bonds that some say the market didn't need. The result was the sharpest bout of inflation observed in more than 4 decades in the States. Similar dynamics unfolded around the world, bringing forth a historic new inflationary era.
Very few households, if you will, ever got to enjoy the benefits of zero interest rate policy. Only your biggest borrowers.
Now on to mistake number 2. When it started to raise interest rates, the bank was doing so at way too slow of a pace. The central bank uses its federal funds interest rate to counteract this high level of inflation. Their models suggest that if this interest rate goes up, that'll make inflation go down. That's exactly what they're trying to do now. The central bank waited until March 2022 to flip the switch and make lending more expensive. They started with quarter percentage rate hikes and have since made bigger hikes. This fast pace of liftoff is a start of a sharp reversal from the past 3 decades of policy.
So the Federal Reserve maintaining record low interest rates for a long period of time sort of led to some of the largest asset bubbles that we ever saw. And people who had money sort of going into the crisis and were able to deploy that capital into the stock market, into the housing market, have done extraordinarily well as a result of the Fed's policies.
The final mistake here was that the Fed waited too long at all. Early signs of inflation took hold for months before the Fed took action. For example, fuel was up more than 50% in November of 2021. Even prices for used cars were up over 30% year over year in the same time frame. This was happening as the Fed kept its interest rates near zero and kept buying massive amounts of bonds. At the time, the bank called inflation transitory, hoping it would pass. So far, it hasn't.
As Chair Powell indicated himself, both of us probably could have used a better term than transitory.
But the Federal Reserve wasn't the only group that made mistakes during this time. Economists believe that the federal government played a very large role in this inflationary spiral too.
Fiscal policy is made by the Congress and the president, and that involves taxation and spending. And that's different from monetary policy because it really affects the amount of money that is going to be in your pocket, whereas monetary policy works through the banking system. So some of the record fiscal stimulus that we saw coming out of the COVID recession were expanded unemployment insurance checks, the general checks, the enhanced child tax credit. All of those were examples of fiscal policy to try to get the economy recovered as quickly as possible.
Economists like the famous Milton Friedman believe that inflation comes from changes in the money supply.
Most of the episodes Milton Friedman looked at were times when governments, which were in deep problems, printed money and handed it out. So if you remember nothing from this, remember one thing. If you print money and hand it out, drop it from helicopters, as Friedman said, you will get inflation.
The current Federal Reserve Board keeps track of this supply in a publicly available dataset. See the sharp uptick in 2020? This money went directly into the hands of actual people who spent it, saved it, or invested the funds. That creates a fierce rush of demand, and at the time, it was outpacing supply of the goods available, possibly creating inflation. A lot of that money went into emergency COVID bills like the American Rescue Plan. The government was able to spend cash it didn't have because it got huge loans from the Fed.
They're printing money to spend it, printing money to hand it out, printing money to make transfer payments. That's exactly what our government did in the last 2 years of pandemic. It's technically not printing money, but it's, from an economic point of view, the same as printing it money and handing it out, and it causes inflation. So that is both monetary and fiscal policy.
The next time there's a handout, don't be so easy to take it. Just bear in mind what got us here, and that was overly intrusive and aggressive fiscal policy that was monetized by the Federal Reserve.
Outside of its own missteps, the government's fight with inflation was accelerated by various things outside of their control. Economists call these events black swans. In the 2020s, these so far have included
COVID, supply chain disruptions,
full-scale invasion by Russia into Ukraine.
But when the US government needs someone to respond to these events, they turn to their Federal Reserve. And whatever the Fed decides to do will then reverberate worldwide. That's because many businesses settle transactions with US dollars, which the Fed controls.
So there is a massive transmission mechanism that transmits U.S. monetary policy to the rest of the world. 80% of all transactions in the world are done using the U.S. dollar. And Fed policy influences and dictates where the U.S. dollar is. So whatever we do is not contained within the United States economy. It affects the global economy.
Dealing with these unexpected shocks is quite difficult, as the Fed wades through other unknowns. As inflation took hold, some voting seats at the Fed stayed open. And making matters worse, a key member was forced to resign in what some believe was an insider trading scandal. Other voting members like Michelle Bowman warned of the danger of excess inflation, but went unheard in the committee chambers.
The Federal Reserve Board is a massive organization full of staff who need to know who's my leader going to be. And Randy Quarles said publicly, had there not been that level of internal uncertainty and strife, that the Fed would have been raising rates last year when it knew policy had become problematic, especially as it pertains to the housing market, which is the only form of inflation right now that is in the Fed's control, and it looks like they're trying very hard to break.
Given that's the situation, it seems like the Fed's decision to continue to prop up the market was misguided, because that sort of added fuel to the inflationary fire that we're currently dealing with.
Economists believe that the Fed now has less ability to get things back on track without sparking a recession. It's still possible, though. To do that, they'll need to rapidly increase lending rates to what economists call a neutral interest rate, one where the economy is neither growing or shrinking too quickly.
The neutral rate is a real interest rate. It doesn't matter if the neutral rate is 3%. That means something very different if inflation is 8% versus if inflation is 2%. If inflation is going to be high and remain higher, that means that the neutral rate in the economy is also going to be higher. Because the price of goods are going up, we need a higher return to stabilize the economy. If we were actually measuring inflation in a consistent manner, the peaks in the 70s and 80s are actually much more similar to the peak today than we would have initially thought.
Still, the stories of the past could be relevant material for today's class of central bankers. While their mistakes are far and few between, they can have a profound impact. And for the record, their good calls can make a big impact too.
If they hold steady and are committed to breaking inflation, as was the case with Paul Volcker, then we'll get to the end of this situation of pain quicker than if they were to try and draw out, postpone, delay the inevitable. So I think at this point, the Fed has to stick to its guns, even if that means taking speculators down. And that really is what has scared the Fed in the past. The Federal Reserve is supposed to make monetary policy in the whole of the public's interest, not just that of investors. And this is going to be a test of which they have not really had to take since 1981.
Okay. So understandably, a lot of that terminology that we heard in that video, we don't understand, or we necessarily are not aware of those things. But what you ultimately need to get out of that is that due to inflation, some of those things that we buy on a commonly basis, whether it be gas, whether it be groceries, and even some of the things that we currently have, like debt, like revolving debt that we have that has variable rates on that, those things are going up because of the inflationary environment that we're currently in. But there are some key ways or some key things that we can do to try to, we're not going to be able to combat inflation. That's for the Fed to do that, to try to utilize those monetary policies to combat inflation, to get things down to a more a level that is appealing to the consumer, which is us. But while they're utilizing this monetary policy or enacting this monetary policy, there's things that we can do, the little guy, you and I, that we can do in order to help ourselves out. Because again, we're all in this environment. I know it's wreaking havoc on our personal budget, because it's wreaking havoc. It's having some weight on my own personal budget that we do month in and month out. And so, but there are some ways that can happen. Adrian.
All right. So guys, so what I took away from that video is that inflation really takes off when the government gives out free money. Money is given away freely, and interest rates are at all-time lows. So that makes the ability to go out and borrow money and to buy things very, very easy. So it's really easy to go out there and buy these larger homes, buy these buy these bigger cars and all this stuff. And that really pushes that's why you see used cars now going for, like they said, 30% more. That's insane that, people were buying cars and selling cars during this time that they had for 3 years, and they were getting more money for the used car than what they paid for the used car when they bought it. So that just shows you, what that inflation did in that short period of time. It gradually started, and then it just took off like a stick of butter now that cost me $2 for 4 sticks of butter. Now that costs you, $4. So I feel you with the budget situation. So what we wanted to do tonight, guys, is just talk to you guys from the standpoint of how do we maintain our budget in this society. A lot of us are on this journey for paying off our debt. We're looking at ways of cutting costs, and inflation is not helping at all because that's more money we have to pay for everyday things. So what we want to do is just kind of give you guys a couple of tips that we used and some tips that we researched, as well as hear from you guys that's on the chat tonight. What are some of the things that you've done in these different areas to help combat, this inflation and to continue to keep you on your financial journey and continue to keep you on track so you don't get discouraged and kind of give up or give way to some of these costs. You're still keeping your eye on the prize. So we'll just start off with a couple of things that we have on our list here. The first thing and foremost is to track your spending. You need to know exactly what you have going out. And this goes back to some of our previous sessions that we talked about, where having that budget is so key to what you're doing every day. Because everything's going to start with that budget, because in order for you to get a handle on these finances, you need to know where your money's going. You need to know how much you're spending on groceries. You need to know how much you're spending on gas. You need to know, exactly what's taking up a majority of your money. All you know is you coming up short at the end of the month, but you have no clue who's taking all your money. So that doing that budget is very key, and sticking to that budget so you can actually see in front of you the numbers about, we spent $1,200 on groceries this month, or we spent $600 in gas this month. This will give you a general idea of how you can manage and see where you can cut back on certain things. So, Rondell, you want to give us some examples of things that we can do to kind of help cut back on some expenses here?
Yeah. So, like Adrian stated, you need to really track your spending. Have that record with you, or make sure you reconcile your account. So your budget is ultimately your account that you're operating with. And when you earmark certain dollars, you need to make sure you're reconciling your account. And what we do in the Smith household, we do some price comparisons when we're out. And what I mean by that is that we're trying to look for the best value for our dollar in there. And most of us will say, "Oh no, I don't have time for that." Well, you kind of do, because sometimes in the stores that you go into, you commonly, where it be we commonly shop at Walmart and we commonly shop at Costco. Those are the two stores that we shop at, my wife and I. And even in Costco, I tend to find some deals that they may be advertised at the time. Like, there's a certain thing that is similar to what I would normally get, but this other item is $5 off because they have a sale for that. So we do a lot of cost comparisons of what we want when we start to go out and buy things. Stephanie, especially when we go into Walmart, I would normally get to the middle of the shelf, and that's where I've always shopped at, was at the middle of the shelf. And Stephanie was like, "Well, why are you shopping at the middle of the shelf?" Because the things typically to be higher in cost right there, because they're at eye level. Me being as short as I am, that's not too hard to do. But she have shown me some tips and tricks that if you go one shelf below, you may find that same item, different brand, but same item similarly, because you may like Hellmann's mustard and they may have Heinz mustard. Both are mustard, but the Heinz mustard being on the lower shelf because it's not one of the preferred items that people are going in there to get. They done discounted that mustard, but it's mustard nonetheless. And then another thing that we've done in our household, outside tracking our spending, doing price comparison, is, as the video has stated, fuel costs have gone up tremendously, and you've seen a fluctuation in fuel costs. And so I don't have the luxury of working at home. I don't work at home. My wife doesn't work at home. So we work away from our homes, and therefore we have to, going to our jobs, we can go 1 week without filling up the gas tank if we fill it up on a Monday. But sometimes, depending on the traffic that we have to transverse through, we may have to do 2 fill-ups in that week. So what we started to do is, okay, based upon what we have to do, and this is key, people, and this is maybe you like, I'm not doing that, but that to each is their own. We started going to where we need to go. And what we mean by that is that we need to go to work because we need to be able to make a wage to sustain the household that we live in. But we don't necessarily need to go. We've been invited on some outings with some friends and stuff like that. We don't necessarily, that's nice to go to, but we don't necessarily need to go there. So there have been times that we've turned down going to additional events, and based upon the distance of how to get there, it was going to be an hour drive from our home. Well, that's almost 1 full tank of gas going there and going back. That's a 2-hour drive. And so we decided, we're going to forego going to so many events in order to save the gas that we are putting in our vehicles for the things that we need to do. So those are some of the things that we do within the Smith household. But Adrian, what are some other things that you may do based upon all the articles that we have read and some things you've done inherently inside your household, you and DeShonda?
Well, for us, the first thing that we did is our biggest bill when we first started at the first month after we did our budget and we brought in all the transactions we had from that previous month. We looked at how much we were spending in groceries. And I don't know about anybody else, but when we used to go to the grocery store, we used to go buy like Nature's Own bread. We used to buy all name brand stuff. We had to have the Martin's potato bread, for our roll, for the buns and, all these different things. And we looked at, and, we kind of, me personally, this is just me personally. I don't know about DeShonda, but me personally, when I saw the Great Value stuff, I figured that was not as good of a product as, like Nature's Own or these other things. But as we got on this debt-free journey and we trying to figure out how to cut down on things, I'm looking at the Nature's Own bread, and then I'm looking at the Walmart bread, which is the same honey wheat that we were buying in the Nature's Own bread. Nature's Own bread was $3.49. And then this honey wheat bread down in the bottom by Great Value was 97 cents. So if you calculate that bread is almost 3.5 times the amount that I was spending to get the Nature's Own bread. I was spending 3 times as much. That's just one item. So you just think about how many different things that we buy in the store that we're going straight for the name brand because we think that product is better in some way because it's not great value. But what we learned is that a lot of these products are made by the same people that make the Great Value stuff is made by a lot of the same people that make the name brand stuff. And when you look at the first time we made the switch, we went through and we bought everything Great Value that we would normally buy. If they made it in Great Value, we tried it. There was some things that didn't work out so well. The family, revolted against it. So, we made concessions where we had to make concessions. But for the most part, we were able to come away with at least about 80 to 85% of the things that we buy, we could buy them in Great Value. And what that did for us is our grocery bill went at the time that we started. This was back in 2018. When we started this transition, our grocery bill went from $600 a month down to about $350. So that in itself gave us an extra $300 a month that we could use towards something else. So that means that we had $300 that we could use towards our debt. And that was just from changing our buying habits in the grocery store. So if you guys look at, I want to challenge you guys to go out next time you go out, switch what your way of thinking is and see how much money you save versus getting the same amount of groceries going with the Great Value or the off-brand, generic, so to speak, versus getting the name brand stuff. Because I challenge you this, whenever you go out to a restaurant and you order food from certain places, how many times do you ask the person that you're ordering the food from, wait a minute, before you sell me this burger, are these Martin's potato rolls that you got back there? Or if you're ordering toast from a restaurant, how many times do you ask them, is this great? Is this Nature's Own bread? Because if it ain't Nature's Own, then I don't want it. So not once did we challenge any of the restaurants that we pay 3 times as much buying this product, that we are so caught up on these names that we're willing to spend more because we think we're getting an inferior product if it's cost less. But as you're going through this journey, you have to look at different things on ways that you can cut back and save on your budget. So that was one of the major things that helped us was dealing with the grocery budget. And mapping out the other thing is, before you do your grocery budget, checking your cabinets, checking your freezer, see what you already have. Because we had a great habit of going out to the grocery store, not looking at what we already had. We come back, putting groceries away, and we bought a brand new can of peanut butter or something, or pasta sauce. Go in the cabinet, there's two things of pasta sauce already in the cabinet and now we got 3 of them. So these are things that you guys have to be mindful of. Write everything down and stick to what you wrote down when you go into the grocery stores to shop. And this way you can kind of keep yourselves in track with your budgets. But that's just one of the other things that we did. Another thing that we did was we cut down on subscriptions. Like when we started this journey, I had Hulu, I had Netflix, I had what's the other one? We had Disney Plus, we had all these different subscriptions. And most of the time, Hulu, I probably hadn't watched it in 3 or 4 months, but I still had the subscription that automatically comes out. Yeah, I think my family members used it more than I did, So, but yeah, those are things that you have to keep in mind. I mean, how many times do we subscribe to like satellite radio? And Pandora is free. You can get the free version of Pandora, listen to the same music. Some of these subscriptions are things that we can kind of cut out on that we're not using. How many of y'all got gym memberships and you may think about going there once a month, or you haven't been there in 3 months, but yet you're still paying $80 to $100 a month for a gym membership that you haven't been to in God knows how long. Because I know you feel guilty for not going, so you figure keeping the membership will keep things on track. But if you're not going, cut the membership out and get you a couple of weights and stuff and work out at home. And this will free up money that you can use in your budget, your everyday budgets, to help you on this journey, so you can stay on track with getting your debt paid off, continue to do your savings goals, continue to achieve the goals that you're trying to do. So that way you can get to the other side and, get to the points where you have that.
So you made a good point, Adrian, on subscriptions. When you talk about subscriptions, like if nobody knows that cable is dated,
right?
Cable subscriptions and hey, shout out to all the direct TVs and the those who still do satellite TV. I get it. You've been loyal customers with them for years, but the 270 channels that they offer you, I guarantee you probably only watch 5 of them on a consistent basis.
Right.
And so we have cut ties. The both of us, we have cut ties with the cable service, whether it be DirecTV or the other service that escapes my mind right at this particular
Comcast,
time.
You got Verizon,
Comcast, Cox Cable, and all those other cable companies. We cut because there's other vehicles out there that you can take advantage of that's low in cost or cost less, but gives you more flexibility. Like Adrian and I, we do YouTube TV. Some of you, we talked about that in the past. Those who may be listening to for the first time, they may have not heard about it. YouTube TV is awesome for me anyway.
Right.
It gives me the flexibility to continue to watch some of the programs that I like to watch. Mind you, I don't watch as many programs on YouTube TV, but NFL and ESPN and those sports channels that I like to watch. And then, of course, if we're talking about finances, MSNBC is one of my favorite channels on YouTube TV. And it's flexible enough that it's just not in my home. I can take it anywhere that I have a device, like a cell phone or a tablet. And as long as I have my account active, I can watch it up there too, and me and my spouse. And then if I go to another location that YouTube TV will sense that I'm in another location and update the local channels to that platform, so I can view local channels of wherever I'm at in that area. Unlike some cable packages, not all of them. I hear DirecTV gives you some of that flexibility too, but some of these cable packages costing you $200-300 a month, depending on the price of your package. Those are some packages that you might want to take a look at and say, do I really look at 270 something plus channels? Probably not. I mean, there's only so many hours within the day, and I'm almost certain that I can say this with confidence that you're not really consuming all those channels, even within a week or a month. Another thing that we do in our household is, and again, it's just what we do here. To again, if you decide to do something differently, but it's something that we realize that most places that we go to in this day and age is Wi-Fi enabled. And so we have cell phone plans and we have prepaid phones where our phone bill is what it is every month. Most of your phone bills are what it is every month also, but we don't have an unlimited data plan. So we pay about $75 a month because wherever we go, we're always in some type of site or shop of data. And then when we're not in a place that use data, we couldn't find out on average, we don't even use the 15 gigs of data that we are being given with these plans that we have on a monthly basis. I think I ran out of data in the last 3 years of having this phone. I ran out of data once. And that's because I was watching videos on the way to work, and I kind of got overly excessive with watching them, and I didn't realize that I ran out of data. But it only happened once in 3 years, and it never happened at any given time with my wife. At the end of the cycle, she's always had like 13 gigs of data left because we're always in an environment that has either free Wi-Fi, whether I'm at my job or whether she's at her school, or we're out and about and we happen to be in the area because our internet provider, Xfinity, I can utilize the data that's within that area because I have internet subscription with Xfinity. So there are creative ways to lower whatever bills that you may have that you may find or see that's excessive in order to help you guard yourself or help you with this inflationary environment that we're currently in. So those are two other things that we do within the Smith household to help us stay on track and also help us combat this inflationary environment. What are some other things that you do, Adrian?
So the other thing that we did was the eating out. The eating out was the next line item for us on our most of our expenses, after our mortgage, which thank God that's no longer a problem. But as far as normal 4-wall type things, after the grocery bill was our eating out bill. How much we were spending going out to restaurants, how much we were spending, getting on fast food because we didn't want to cook, and then it was almost like second nature. When the weekend hits, you go out to eat. Like every weekend we go out to eat, sometimes on Friday night, sometimes Friday night and Saturday nights, and when you looked at the cost, what really shocked us into line was we looked at that, like I said, the first 2 months after we did our budget, and we looked at and it downloaded our statements into the app that we were using. We found out that we had spent almost $1,000 eating out. That happened to be the time that we were all going out to Center Bistro. We go out to Center Bistro to the movies and, we get a meal, that's $100. You factor in eating lunch, we go out with coworkers, we spend $10 here, spend $15 here, spend $8 there, going out to lunch with coworkers. If you go out to lunch with coworkers 3 days a week, that's about $30. That's just eating lunch with coworkers. That's not factoring out you going out ordering Chinese, for the family, or you doing all these other things during the week. Over time, that money adds up. And, when we saw all the numbers together, we were shocked that we had spent that much money just eating out. So that's another reason why it's so key that everybody has to document and understand where your money is going. Because if you knew you were spending this much money in eating out or spending this much money on groceries, it would probably spark something to say, wait a minute, that's why I'm coming up short at the end of the month. We need to cut back on how much we're eating out. because that can take up a lot of your money. I mean, the average people spend, they say roughly about $300 a month eating out. You know, that's the average. But, you know, if you're more common than that, where you're eating out or you're doing these things, like I said, eating lunch, or you stop at McDonald's on the way in, get a coffee and a Egg McMuffin. You know, it may only be $2 or $3, but you do that twice a week, you know, that's another $15, you know, that you're adding up, you know. So these are things that that we really want you guys to be mindful of. Really take a look at it and see what's going on with your household. And then you factor in, if you got kids like me, we have to pay for kids' lunches. You got to factor that in. You know, are they going to eat lunch at school, or are we going to pack lunch? You know, luckily my youngest one likes rather have her lunch packed. So she takes peanut butter sandwiches or whatever sandwiches she wants in. That's another way to cut down on these costs. So that's another thing. Dining out is really killing us as far as, you know, eating out is really killing our budgets and our finances. So we spend a lot of money in that kind of stuff. You know, when that can be used for one, to paying off your debt. And then once your debt is gone, now you can use that money to start saving for other things. You know, like we talked about the college fund and talked about saving up for your new car instead of automatically looking to go finance that new car. Now you got a fund that you got this extra money going into every month. You know, 10 months of putting, you know, money aside, or 2 years of putting $500 into an account, man, that adds up. You can go buy a $15,000 car in 2 years, you know, just from putting that money aside. And this
Hopefully
is all
not
money
in this inflationary market though. Don't buy it.
Yeah, exactly. And this is all money. And we haven't even told you to said that you need to get a part-time job, as Rondell called a PT. This is all money that you've already earned that's coming in, that you're just managing better. You're aware of where that money is going, so you're putting it in its proper places. So, you know, if you don't tell your money where to go, your money goes wherever it wants to, and you have no control over. So Absolutely. You're just kind of putting it in perspective.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So they've discussed this year. So I do a lot of listening to some economists and listening to how even the climate, if those who were in Virginia, if you didn't feel that cold spell that we had last week, where it dramatically dropped down into the 30s overnight, where we had some freeze warnings in here, they're expecting energy costs to go up higher this year. And inflation has something to do with that, because that's part of our CPI data that comes out once a month, where they tell us how the index has risen based upon those things we commonly consume. And so most of us probably have that one room in the house that may be too cold or too warm during certain times of the year. It is time now to, weatherproof, and so to speak, of your house. You need to go around and find those areas within your home, and you need to fix those things. Whether it be a small leaky faucet can cost a lot of money for those who pay a water bill. If there's air escaping certain areas of your house where your house is seeping air, then and it may need some caulking. $2-3 caulking from Lowe's could save you amount of money over time, where your thermostat is not kicking on so much. I recently myself had bought this new vent that goes into the floor of our home, because we've noticed that our master bedroom being so large, and we have a return in there, but the return is hard for the return to continue to heat that space because the bedroom is so large. So there was this vent that I purchased for $70 that has 2 fans that are associated with it. So it helps draw that hot air. If the thermostat kicks on, draw that hot air to push more warm air into that room. And so that way we can not have that thermostat constantly running all the time in the house once that room reached that temperature, that desired temperature over there. But there are some ingenious ways, or not so ingenious, just simple ways where you can adjust your energy bills. Turn the lights off. If you're not in the room, turn the lights off in the room, things of that nature. If you're not watching that TV, don't have that TV on. a thing that we did in Germany, because Germany electrical was so expensive that, and I'm not suggesting anybody do here, but I have seen a guy that did it in my service, in my career. He would unplug all his appliances that he wasn't using throughout the day when he wasn't at home. Like his washer and dryer, without a shadow of a doubt. He will unplug his washer and dryer, his TV. The only thing he wouldn't unplug was his stove and his refrigerator. But the things that constantly has something, some sort of a memory that draws some type of energy, he will constantly unplug those things while he was not home. And when he was showing me his savings of doing that, I thought that was ingenious. Now, mind you, at the time, my mindset wasn't at where it is right now. I wasn't doing those things. But when we went to Germany, and we could have found out that how much it costs to have electricity in Germany, and it was very costly, more costly than it is here in America. We did practice that, and we did see instant savings on our electrical bill when we started unplugging those items that we didn't commonly use. And one of the items that we didn't commonly use, we had a kitchen counter microwave. Didn't commonly use it, so we unplugged it. You know, we had our TV that was plugged up into the walls, the TV that we currently still have now. We unplugged it because we rarely watch TV during the week. We normally watch most of our programs, and even now we mostly watch our programs during the weekend versus on the weekdays. There are other ingenious ways. If you really want to be about it, there are some extremes you can go to cut your expenditures in certain areas, and energy costs being one of them. And so, Adrian, now before we get to the point where we want to wrap this up, what are some other tips and tricks that you can share with the audience about
I got
some of the expenditures?
Yeah, so I got 3 things left that I want us to hit before we end this call. So I'm gonna make these short. First and foremost, your cars. Maintain the maintenance on your cars, because having to go out and purchase a new car at this point and in this environment right now is not going to feel good at all when you got to spend, $15,000 for a 2012 with 175,000 miles on it. That's not what you want to be doing right now in this environment. So your cars, treat them as if they were brand new. The reason that most of us feel like we need a new car is because, we're dissatisfied with what we have. So it's no different than if you had a new pair of shoes and you went out and walked in the mud in that brand new pair of shoes, and now those shoes look like trash. So same way with your cars. Keep your cars clean on the inside. Keep them cleaned out. If they look new, you don't feel like it needs to be replaced. When you get the maintenance done in your car, get the scheduled maintenance done when it's time to have the scheduled maintenance done. What this does for you is it keeps your car running, so that way you don't get these surprise bills that are unexpected when, and this stuff compounds. So not only now do you need to get, hoses and all this stuff replaced on your car, but also now you need to get new tires, and all this stuff compounds at one time. And then us, the society, the mindset that we have, the first thing, when I'm not putting this much money into this car, I'm just going to go get a new one. So you'll trade in spending $2,000 or $3,000 to get this car fixed and get it up to par and running. You'll go out and buy another $20,000 car and finance it just to save from spending $3,000 on a car just to get it back up and running, because you're dissatisfied with it and you look at it and it's dirty. It's got, stuff all over the inside. So what I've learned is that when you take care of your stuff, you keep it clean, you're less subject to feel dissatisfied with it from that perspective. So next time you look at your car and you get dissatisfied with it, take it and get it clean. Spend $30. If you don't want to clean it yourself, spend $30 and have somebody else clean it. That's so much cheaper than you going and getting a $300 or a $400 or $500 car note just to have a new car that in a year you're going to have that one just as junky as the one that you just got rid of. So just think about that and keep that in mind. So just take care of your car, keep the maintenance done, and that car will treat you well. The next thing I want to talk about is vacations. Social media is our biggest detriment when it comes to what we do with vacations. We see people, because everybody posts their vacations and they in all these exotic places, and you get to the point where you say, what, I want to go to these places. I get it. I was there. We did the same thing. So, but you got to do you got to do these things for what you can afford. If the only way you can go on this trip is that you have to put it on a credit card or you have to finance it in any way, that means that you can't afford to go on that trip. It doesn't mean that you can't go on that trip in the future,
Amen.
but you have to plan to go on that trip. You have to make arrangements to go on that trip. Don't put yourself in debt for a 3-day trip or a 7-day trip that you could be paying for the next 8 months just to go on a trip so you can get a couple of pics to post, on Facebook to show everybody else that, yeah, I can go to these places too. Yeah, but if you can't afford it, that's what me and Shonda's whole mantra was when we started this. If we didn't have the cash to pay for it cash, then we couldn't afford it. That don't mean we couldn't afford it later, but at that point in time, we couldn't afford it. The last thing that I wanted to hit before we go is the holiday season is upon us. And this is one of the biggest things that gets people this time of year. And they regretting everything they do for the next 2 months. They regretting it and grinding teeth from January, February, March, because they paying for all the stuff they went out and bought to cover, for Christmas. Christmas is great. I understand everybody loves giving gifts. They love the look people have on their faces when they open up their gifts on Christmas. But we got to understand that if we don't have the money available, if you got to go out and put this stuff on a credit card, or if you got to do no interest financing, or if you've got to do anything that says that you can't pay for it and own it when you get it, then that means that you can't afford it. And what me and DeShonda did when we started this journey, we sat down with both of our kids because they were really the only ones that I was concerned about. I talked to my mom. I talked to all our friends and family. We told them, look, we got goals that we're trying to achieve. So for the next 3 years or 4 years or however long it took us to get to what our goals were, we told them, look, we're not getting any gifts. You don't have to worry about buying us any gifts. And we're not going to be buying any gifts, for Christmas. We can come over, we can all get together as a family, but we don't have to exchange gifts. That does 2 things for you. That takes the pressure off of your family members to feel like they got to buy you something when they are in the same boat as you. They don't have the money to spend on all these different gifts. And 2, it saves you the money from having to go out and spend all this money that you don't have to go buy these gifts for people. So what we did with our kids, we gave them a budget. Me and my wife figured out how much we wanted to allocate for them for Christmas. And I'll tell you, we told both of the kids, we got $150 each for you guys. You can take it in cash, you can take it in gifts, or a combination of the 2. The girls looked at us, they was like, cool, we can do that. And we explained to them why we were doing it. So now the benefit of us doing that, 3 years ago is now in 2 weeks, we taking them on a 5-day cruise, out in the Bahamas, in the middle of the school year. They got a couple of days off. So now we have the ability to do that kind of stuff because of the sacrifices we made before. So now we got trip planned for Christmas. When you pay off all your debt, now your money is available for you not only to give and help other people, but now you got money to do these things and you pay cash for it. So when we come back, we don't still owe anybody for that vacation we just took. So those are the things that I wanted to hit up real quick, just to give you guys an idea of, what this does when you're monitoring your money, when you're smart with your money. It gives you the ability to do some other things later on. So you're sacrificing right now. You're managing your money right now, and you're learning how to manage what God has blessed you with right now. Because if you can manage a little, when God bless you with a lot, you'll be good. You'll be good to go. So that's really what I wanted to say, and get that out before we ended the session tonight. So
Amen. Yeah. So remember, guys, we're all in this inflationary environment.
Right.
Don't think we're not. When you get a chance, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Maybe we can talk about it on our next thread. When you go out, pick up something that you customly would buy before, if you can remember what the price was, and take a look at that price now. Take a look at the gas prices that you made, because commonly on Tuesday, gas prices tend to fluctuate between 20 to 30 cents, depending on what's going on in the economy, where are we pumping enough oil, or are we buying enough oil, or if the oil prices are higher and lower? We need to get a little bit more savvy as a people, as whether it be as an African American culture, or as an American culture, or just as people in general. We need to become more financially literate, and we also need to raise our IQ level when it comes down to economics. These things play hand in hand. Economics and finances play hand in hand, as the video stated. You got fiscal policy, you got monetary policy, government, Federal Reserve, and these both things run in the same circles. And we need to be a little bit more savvy, because we need to know when it is too much of an inflationary environment for us to go out and purchase some of the things like Adrian stated before. Okay, maybe you need to spend that $3,000, that $1 to $3,000 to sustain the vehicle that you currently have. Although you may have saved the money to buy a newer vehicle, maybe you need to hold on to that, because the prices of the used vehicles have gone up 20% since the time of the pandemic. And so now you're paying 20% more for a vehicle that's not worth the 20% that you're going to pay more for, because we're in this inflationary environment. You know, allow the Federal Reserve and those monetary policies to take place in order to drive that inflationary rate down, so you can get a better bang for your buck. Some of you are out there right now posturing with that 20% that you bought ready to put down on that new home, or the home that you want to retire in ultimately, because you've already gone through baby step 1 through 4. And you're like, hey, I think I'm ready to buy a home now, because I got the 20% that I need. Now, mind you, the home prices of today was not the home prices before we got into this inflationary period. So you might want to hold off, talk to your realtor, but also talk to your financial banker, and see that what you're doing is is it worth the squeeze right now, holding off another 6 months, another maybe even 12 months. Because Stephanie and I, we definitely wouldn't have bought a house or built a house. We would have probably rented, yes, but we wouldn't have purchased a house in this inflationary market, because we understand that once the houses value come back in line, you may find yourself with a little bit of upside down, where you got a house that's not as valued. Because I've already done it before, been there, done that back in 2006, between 2006 and 2008. The same era that we're in primarily right now happened back then. So I know not to buy a house when we're in this inflationary market. So become a little bit more savvy. And then as we go through our sessions in the upcoming weeks, let's just throw those impromptu questions out there. You know, challenge us, people, because we're really here to help everyone. We want everyone not to only go on this journey and be successful at the end of the journey, but we also want you to be infectious and effective to those who you may meet within your personal circles when you leave this session and you go out and you talk about some of the topics that we talked about here tonight. Adrian?
Yep. All right, but guys, that's it for our session tonight, guys. We thank you for joining us. And like always, we're just giving you guys a different perspective on things. We're giving you a perspective on some things that we learned and some tips that we use to get us from being, several $100,000 in debt to today being 100% debt free, and not having to stress and not having to worry about, debt, or how these bills are going to get paid, or how we're going to meet this at the end of the month. We can freely give to family members instead of having to loan to family members. We can freely take our kids on these trips that we wanted to take them on before, but we didn't have the money, and we're no longer using debt to leverage those trips. Now we can take them on trips and we can pay cash, because when we go to work, we're working for ourselves and not for creditors and not for mortgages and these type things, because, we were diligent and gazelle intense for that short period of time. And now you got the rest of your life to really live and enjoy the fruits of the blessing that God has given us. So guys, we thanks again for joining us, and you guys have a good night, and we'll see you guys again next week. All right. Have a good one.
Good night, everyone.